All right, shout out to one and all. We're doing a very, very quick stream. Shout out to you all, guys. You see that it's about moments in Man of Steel that we're going to be discussing. This is because mostly I talk about these movies, and to me, these movies are great. And unlike other comic book movies, which focus on action and special effects and the power qualities of, or the qualities of the superhero, their gifting, their qualities as a superhero. Um, I find that the DCU focuses on moments, and these moments are not necessarily action-packed moments. So I'm going to just look at those things. But before I do, I will start off with a piece of scripture. I'm going to go from, in this case, I'm going to go from Isaiah. Okay, Isaiah, and we're going from chapter 11 into chapter 12. We're going from verse 15. God shall utterly destroy the tongue of the Egyptian sea. With his mighty wind shall he shake his hand over the river, and shall smite it into the seven streams, and make men go over dry shod. And there will be a highway in the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, like as it was to Israel in the day that he came out of the land of Egypt. In that day you shall say, O Lord, I will praise you. Though you were angry with me, your anger is turned away. You have comforted me. Behold, you are my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. Basically, it's the reversal of oppression. All right, and we know that oppression, it comes in all kinds of forms. If you ask me, oppression is really where people decide to take away the freedoms of other people because they're stronger, and they abuse their powers, and they abuse their gifts. And powers and gifts are not given for us to enslave people, but they are, in fact, to free people, free people's minds. This is why I like the DCEU, and that's why I focus on it. So let's talk about some of these moments in the DCEU which were empowering. And we'll start off with Man of Steel, and I'll go through some of the other movies. Now, these are not all the moments in Man of Steel. There's several moments in Man of Steel which are very memorable, but I like to talk about these. Some of them are action set pieces. Some of them are not, okay? But may involve action. And I feel that the dramatic elements of Man of Steel are real. It feels real because the thing about it is the relatability is not superficial. And too many times comic book movies, and especially directors, they manipulate the emotions of people and tell you what to feel at certain moments. What I like about Zack Snyder is he basically emulates or imitates what really happens in life and leaves you to decide how you feel about it. That's one of the cool things about his films. Anyway, let's talk about Man of Steel. So some of the most fantastic moments, and the thing about the DCEU is it really is made up of moments. There are great moments in Man of Steel. And I think that the way how Man of Steel was constructed with the layers of realism in it, I think that's what made Man of Steel such a great film. And you would actually feel certain things in certain moments in the film. So Man of Steel is more about moments. So let's get into some of the moments in Man of Steel. So one of them was, and this is just one of several moments in Krypton, when we're on Krypton, where Jor-El steps outside of the Council of Krypton, which is under siege by General Zod's people. And as he steps outside, we see the vast expanse of the war going on Krypton, where General Zod's tribe and General Zod's army is actually posing a revolt. And while we're not focused on that revolt, we're focused on Jor-El, we get a glimpse of it. And that is one of those moments, seeing that it's really, truly a moment, okay, in Man of Steel. A tremendous moment, because it gives us not only the vast scope of what is going on in Krypton, but it also gives us an idea of how powerful General Zod and his armies are and what their intentions are. Okay, so it's a vast, as you can see, it's a vast war here. Okay, and everybody knows that's a moment in Man of Steel. Now, the next moment in Man of Steel I find is one which is very empowering. And that is the moment we are revealed that Kal-El has superpowers, that Clark Kent, he has these great powers. Now, we saw him walk through fire. We saw him climb up the oil rig. So we kind of knew that. But this is where he expresses what Superman is all about. Superman uses his powers and abilities not to oppress people, but to free them, to liberate them, to save them. And we saw this is one of the moments which I think a lot of people get goose pimples for, because it's just incredible. This one man trying to hold up this rig tower that is collapsing on itself, and he fails in his effort and he's overcome. But the point is, he does it just long enough to save the lives of the people who are escaping in the helicopter off the helipad. And it's one of those really fantastic, dramatic, epic moments of Man of Steel. Everybody, I think anyone who has seen that moment, they feel goosebumps. It's not because of how buff Henry Cavill is. It's not showcasing his buffness. It's literally about an ideal beyond a human being or beyond a Kryptonian or beyond a living person. It's about the purpose of life. And for the first time, we see the purpose of life is to preserve life. And it's just one of the most awesome moments where we see Kal-El just really going at it hard, really trying to hold up the structure. And contrast that with what you saw in Justice League, where he picked up a building and it kind of defied the laws of physics and stuff. And I can understand why people who support Zack Snyder's way of filmmaking, they would say this is shoddy and we hate it. It's cheap. Joss Whedon, what the hell are you doing, Joss Whedon? And they feel it's Joss Whedon that did it. And I can understand that. Now, I still put everything in context that even though it's a suspension of belief that Joss Whedon did, and we talk about bioelectrical aura and all of that stuff, but it really can't justify it. I must say that Whedon still gave a flavor that reminds us of the MCU fantasy. So the MCU doesn't try to explain things. They just throw things in there. And so at certain points in Justice League, we get that MCU kind of approach to things. And for those people in the DCEU who are more science fiction buffs, they feel like that is just a travesty. No, Superman, look at Superman in BVS. Look at Superman there. Look at Superman here. Look at Superman there. You know, so I get why they were outraged by it, but I let it slide because, in my opinion, it was about still following the story, pinpointing it, and just moving along with the story at the time. I forgave it, but of course, we need to see a Snyder cut. Which will definitely give us a much more grounded Superman. He'll still be much more powerful, and he'll still be fantastic. But I think Whedon cheapened the realism of Superman. And I think that's what a lot of people felt robbed by. And in Man of Steel, we definitely got it. This guy felt like a normal human being like us. Even in the moments when he's trying to hold up the oil rig, he feels like a normal human like we are. So I can understand. And the thing that makes the impact on the MCU, I'm sorry, the DCEU and Man of Steel in particular, is that the realism of Man of Steel. Even when you look at the planet Krypton, it feels grounded. You know, it's not the same kind of planet as Earth, but it feels grounded. And then the fact that, you know, if Superman goes into space or if Superman, you know, has to go into a different atmosphere, like Krypton's atmosphere is affected by it, I find these things very interesting. And I found that the MCU really, you know, held fast to certain principles governing realism and reality. And then, of course, the entire Man of Steel, you know, you see Walmarts and you see gas stations that you know, with labels that you know, you see stores that you know it's a small town, a small village, and you're still seeing people are behaving like normal people, etc., etc., etc. People were criticizing Man of Steel and say product placement, but I didn't think of it as product placement. I thought of it as our world, and it's very familiar to us. You know, the newspapers behaved like how our newspapers behave. The news had media outlets that we were familiar with and personalities we were familiar with. I found that to be something that could say, okay, this is our world. This is really our world, and this fictional character has come to our world. The military behaved like real military, etc. That helped to ground the sense of realism, so that when we saw Clark actually holding up this oil rig, and you know, we flashed to Clark on a ship, and it's like real sailors on that ship. It's not like they're pretending to sail; they're sailing on a real sea. This is not CGI. You know, the oil rig might have been part CGI, part real, but the point is, you know, the ship going on the sea was a real ship. That was a real sea, you know. You felt like it was real sailors. They were doing a real job, you know. And so that's the illusion of reality that Zack Snyder does, and that's what's called hyperrealism. And basically, Christopher Nolan, because if you look at most of Zack Snyder's films, except for Owls of Ga'Hoole, most of Zack Snyder's films were highly stylized, very out there, sucker punch, highly stylized. I mean, it was really somebody's imagination. So, but 300, highly stylized. Dawn of the Dead was much more grounded than all those other movies. It definitely was a much more grounded movie. but highly stylized movies. Even Watchmen was highly stylized. But when you came to Man of Steel, the sense of realism that was brought to that movie, that's the irony of the situation, even more realism than Dawn of the Dead, is just incredible. And I think we have to give it credits to David Goyer's writing as well as Christopher Nolan's writing, Christopher Nolan's overseeing of it. And I got to say, though, amazingly, it's even, I would say Man of Steel is even a much more realistic film. This is crazy to say. It's a much more realistic film than Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, his entire trilogy. And his trilogy was much more grounded, and he was really trying to go for realism and to say, if Batman existed in our world, this is what it would look like, right? And he actually used real places, real towns, real villages. But I still feel like Man of Steel is much more real than even that. Even though Superman has superpowers, the way how he's presented with his superpowers, the way how they explain his superpowers, makes him feel like it's possible that somebody like that exists out here. You know, and to me, that's very interesting. I believe that they sort of borrowed off of the concepts of Men in Black, where, you know, someone among us who looks like us. But it's just amazing how, you know, when we see Kal-El in the beginning of Man of Steel, he looks like an everyday Joe. We're introduced to him, and then we realize, okay, this guy is different. Okay, this guy is different. And of course, even when this structure collapsed, I don't know for you guys, but in my first watch, I was thinking, how did he survive that? Because I didn't fully understand it. And I was thinking, he's dead. He's dead, isn't he? He's dead. I know he's very strong, but it looks like he died, you know? And those kinds of things are really fantastic. When you can have an audience guessing what just happened to this guy. Yeah, we know he's super strong, but what happened to him? He was bareback, you know? Yeah, okay, I saw him go through the flames and he didn't get burned. But this guy, he's still sweating and it's still hot. And you can see he's using all his strength and he did not hold up the tower. What happened to him? And we see him down on the ground. And remember, this is metal. Metal literally smashes things. But what's his name? The Man of Steel. So he's kind of like steel. So, of course, he didn't die. But did he drown? That's the other thing we did, you know. And we were watching the story as he started to sort of hallucinate and go back in time. And I love how they did that. But the point is, this was a moment where everybody, I'm sure everybody in the cinema started getting goosebumps. This is one of the most memorable moments of Man of Steel. All right. Let's do another one. A very dramatic moment and still has that epic feel to it. This was another very, very memorable moment in Man of Steel when Superman started to fly. I believe we had never seen Superman learn to fly. It has never been shown in live action. Never. We've seen it in Smallville, in TV, you know, but not on live action film. And this was a fantastic moment that we saw. Again, credit to David Goyer and Christopher Nolan, because Christopher Nolan, his films before in the Dark Knight trilogy were about Batman becoming Batman. Now Goyer took it further and said Superman becoming Superman, right? So that's where we see him fly for the first time and see him in the suit for the first time. And it is one of the most epic and dramatic moments on screen ever since Christopher Reeves took to the sky and flew. And what makes it so epic and enjoyable is there is no violence associated with it. It is a moment of pure flight, pure freedom, pure energy, and the joy that comes on his face as he's flying through the sky is one of the most memorable moments of Man of Steel. And this is why Man of Steel, when it first came out, it was an underappreciated film, and then it became much more appreciated. And over time, it's just becoming more and more a favorite in the DCEU. And people who didn't even like the DCEU, when they started watching Man of Steel more and more. And there's these dramatic moments in it, because remember, this guy takes this guy and flies. For the first time, he's freely trying to be what he is. His father, at least the consciousness of his father, gives him permission to be as fully as he could be. All that time in his life, he had suppressed who he was. You got to understand. Now his father gives him permission to test all his limits, to go to the nth degree. And that's incredible. You see him flying over Africa. You see him flying, you know, in Europe. You see him flying all over the world. It's just amazing. And he's having a blast. And that appeals to our psyche. And so it's not just a dramatic moment, an empty dramatic moment. It's a dramatic moment which literally liberates us as we watch him fly. How many of you guys, when you were little, you dress up in a cape and jump off the chair or table or something, trying to fly? Or you run around the house as if you're flying? This is that moment. And it's a very memorable moment in Man of Steel. And again, has nothing to do with adversary, not trying out something to wage war against someone or nothing like that. It's not like Iron Man or Captain America or any of those MCU films where they're trying out their powers because they need to use it for something. No, this is just some guy discovering himself and being free to be himself. This alien, who's alien to earthly ways, has been cultured as a human, but never fully accepted as one. Now he's getting to be fully accept himself as a Kryptonian. It's an awesome moment. And so I just wanted to share that with you guys. Again, there's a lot more oomph to it. This moment was very, very dramatic. It's a very dramatic moment. It's not epic, but it's a dramatic moment in Man of Steel. Very counterintuitive, very dramatic moment where Jonathan Kent gives his life for his son's preserved identity. Seems so fickle, and some people say, oh, why did you allow his father to die? Well, if you jumped in front of everything and saved your father, people would see you do it, right? He hasn't. This is a point in time where Superman's talking back to Lois Lane about how he was suppressing his skills, he was suppressing his ability, he was suppressing his Kryptonian identity to fit in. And his father was the one responsible for him doing so, because his father truly believed that when the time was ready and when he was ready, he could present himself to the world, but he didn't feel he was ready right now, and neither the world for him. So this is one of those fantastic moments. It's very, very dramatic. It's probably a moment where you may break down, shed a tear, or you will feel a bit down or depressed that Jonathan Kent, who's such a fantastic guy, he ends up losing his life. And some people say he loses his life over a dog. Well, not really. He was saving a lot of people's lives. He did go back for the dog. The dog has escaped, and so we know that dog in the story, he's dead now, right? There's another dog that they replaced him with. But the point is that Jonathan Kent was selfless. He was about caring for other people. And we all know this moment here shows, again, self-sacrifice for the better good, that there's something bigger than himself. He saw it in Clark Kent. He didn't know he was Kal-El in Clark Kent. He saw it, and he felt he had to sacrifice his life for it. Kind of reminds me of Antiope throwing herself in front of a bullet, willing to take that bullet and die so that Diana would go forward. I think that's the parallel there, because Antiope knew what Diana was, but Diana didn't fully know what she was yet. And so I feel like that's the same thing. Like Jonathan Kent bites the bullet because he believes that this guy is just way too precious for me for his identity just be revealed, and then all this pressure put upon him. And he was absolutely correct, by the way. I mean, BVS showed us that. And at least Clark was sort of almost kind of ready for that. But just imagine if this young Clark here, inexperienced Clark, who doesn't know who he is, all of a sudden all of this stuff comes down on him. Then the governments come down on him. They want to take him, dissect him, etc., etc., etc. So Jonathan Kent, in his wisdom, made the wise choice of sacrificing himself to make sure that Clark and Clark's mother don't get a whole set of attention due to them, and people report them and stuff. And even in Smallville, people were murmuring about him, and they were trying to downplay it. So it would have been crazy if he went and saved his father. And it kind of leads back to the point that his father really truly believed that maybe if he had not even helped the kids in the bus and the tragedy happened, he was the sole survivor, that actually it might have worked out in his favor to attract less attention to him. Because in the end, we all know Pete Ross was interviewed, and that's how Lois Lane found him, right? All right, so let's keep it moving here. Let's keep it moving. So this was a tremendously dramatic moment. This one, depending on who you are, this would be a moment that, for me, it was a dramatic moment. It's my personal dramatic moment. Maybe you have other dramatic moments you would want to share, which maybe were personally you deal with. But this was one of my personal dramatic moments. And this moment had to do with Superman hovering over the military. declaring his presence for the first time to the world. And he's declaring his presence to surrender himself to mankind. I found that so counterintuitive at the time, seeing him hovering over the military and just kind of hovering there like Superman really would. And he even talked like Superman. So for me, this was one of those memorable moments I remember in Man of Steel. Now, you may not remember it like that, or you may think of it as one of your memorable moments, but for me, it was. Yes. Okay, cool. Let me see what else we got here. Okay. This clearly was a memorable. Hold on one second, guys. I gotta go. Somebody's calling. There's a disturbance there. Somebody came and they were calling or something. All right, so I'm going back to what I was saying. So here, this Smallville, that the whole entire Smallville scene and a little bit before it, with General Zod and Kal-El being on the Kryptonian ship and so on, and even General Zod calling out Kal-El, were all epic moments, okay? But the most epic moments in Man of Steel, everybody knows, this is undisputable, and the action sequence is just incredible. The Smallville scenes. I remember when the first pass that the military aircraft had, and they shut down the Kryptonians, you know, shut back the big Kryptonians, shut Fiora L, shot Superman. Incredible. And they rebound. Then the big Kryptonian jumps on a plane and takes it down, and it's just, it's the first time we see Superman unleash his full sheer force, and all these other super beings. We see these gods going fully at it with one another, and it's just a totally different story. Just imagine gods went fully at one another. How much damage and destruction would happen. And so it was just an incredible scene. And just watching human beings like you and me, the military, try to handle that was impressive as well. You know, because the military had their say in it too. They had their say in what was happening. Super speed, super strength, super power. It's just incredible. In the end, the military had to blow up a number of different things. Finally, they take down Fiora, and she's removed. But it's just incredible, the kind of action, the kind of, you know, Superman going toe-to-toe with Fiora and the big guy, Superman going toe-to-toe with Zod. I mean, it's incredible. So, I mean, the Smallville scene is one of the most memorable action scenes I've seen, and we've never seen anything like that in cinema ever. And bar none, probably the #1 action scenes of Man of Steel. I think this is the #1 action scene of Man of Steel. It trumps even the final act with Zod and Superman. But just the super speed, the way how they move, the way how they were interfacing with human beings. Remember when they went fought in the IHOP, and then they bust through a building, bust through a bank. The military come on the scene to try and handle the situation and contain it. And they're just no match for the Kryptonians. It's incredible, okay? The next very incredible scene, and again, it's more of an action sequence, is when General Zod uses the world engines to basically start to terraform the Earth. It's immensely incredible. It reminds us of 9/11. It's scary as day. It's dread. It's impactful. It's crazy, okay? And equally crazy, though more like a video game, is Superman trying to take down the world engine. But I don't think that's the memorable moment I'm looking at. The memorable moment is when the world engine kind of pins him down inside of its terraforming device, and he sort of grits his teeth, and then he really just torpedoes up against that and takes out the world engine. To me, that particular moment, flashing together with this particular moment here, let me see if I can find it for you. this moment here. This is a moment where Perry White comforts the young intern. That moment in time to me is just priceless. Okay, this is a moment in time where he's consoling her as everything's coming down and going to hell. This is one of the most incredible moments I've ever seen on film. And it's an action piece, but still it's not an action piece. It's a dramatic piece. And they were building it, building it, building up to the crescendo of this point where they're really trying to do something, and he's just trying to keep her calm. And it's amazing to me, this particular moment. And then after that, of course, Superman goes and destroys the world engine. And it's a moment I remember in Man of Steel. I remember it really quite a lot. And the final moment I want to talk to you guys about in Man of Steel has to do with the final fight between General Zod and Superman after the world engine is taken down. I know there's several other moments with Faora coming in and trying to take out guards, and then they commit suicide, blow the plane into the thing, and it goes into the Phantom Zone, blah, blah, blah. That's a really incredible moment. But for me, that's just the super speed, the kind of way they lunge and fight and move was impressive. I do agree that certain parts of it looked a little bit tacky, but for the most part, just watching them really scrap it out, you know, and then scrap it out in the sky is just, never seen that stuff before. Not the way how it was done. It never was done on cinema like that. And so for me, it was incredible to watch. I know a lot of people said, well, you know, when Zod threw Superman through the building, he was killing people. I don't know about that, because a lot of people evacuated the buildings and they had gotten down to the city streets, and they were trying to get out of the city. So I don't think that anybody was really inside of those buildings. And we clearly saw there was not much people inside the buildings, even though we know for Wayne Tower, there were still people inside the buildings of Wayne Tower that died, I think in floors above, such as Jim or Jake or whatever his name was. So yes, there were people that died as a result of Zod and Superman fighting. But I do believe, though, that for the most part, it wasn't a bunch of people who died because of their fight. I think it was more the terraforming of the earth. A lot of people died. Now, it's interesting, though, just watching that fight and just the way how they fought. And so I really enjoyed it. And if you look at Krypton, they fight the same way, right? So it's the same style of fighting. That means David Goyer had something to do with it. You know, Krypton looks a lot cheaper than the all-out splash of money that was put out for Man of Steel. We see a lot of parallels because, of course, David Goyer was behind it. But I just really enjoyed that. And there are a lot of memorable moments here. Also, another thing I will beg people to check out is the musical score when the latter half, when Zod is facing Superman, and Superman, they're coming through the sky, and they break the sound barrier, and then they're coming down to Earth. The pieces of the satellite are coming behind them, and then they crash into the building, and then Superman holds up Zod, and then he's going to, you know, he's got him tightly, and Zod flashes his eyes. That same musical score, I beg somebody to go match it up with the musical score at the end of BVS when Superman picks up the kryptonite spear, and he charges at Doomsday, and he stabs Doomsday, and eventually Doomsday stabs him back, and then they both, you know, release energy and die, right? I beg you guys to check out the musical score of that and pit it right against Man of Steel's score. You will see that they're identical scores by Hans Zimmer. It's very interesting because, of course, we all know Doomsday is a sort of mixed hybrid of General Zod. So it's very interesting that the same thing that happened to General Zod facing Superman is more or less, at least music-wise, is the same kind of thematic ending that we got with BVS. So I just thought it was just a cool thing to check out. You know, as I was looking at it, I was listening to musical scores, and I was like, hey, this is the same musical score. Wow. You know, so just a side note. But these are some of the dramatic moments that I've seen on film, and I just wanted to point it out to you guys. Let's see what you guys are saying in the comment section before I get out of here. Hold on a second here. All right, so nobody's saying anything in the chat section. That's pretty interesting. I don't know if it's YouTube doing this. YouTube may be because I'm seeing zero waiting. What's that about? Zero waiting. What's going on? Okay. Anyway, we're keeping it going. I changed the setting on YouTube because they didn't want me to like almost play a stream. It's really weird. YouTube just changed up some stuff. Well, these were some of the memorable moments of Man of Steel, and I'm just trying to talk to you guys and show you that it's about memorable moments. And here, the final thing I want to show you guys is the military's presence throughout all of the DCEU. It's really amazing. And I just want to comment a little bit on that. So you would notice that in Man of Steel, we had a military presence. General Swanwick was the head of U.S. Northcom. All right, he is the general, obviously, and then we had the general here who became the successive general of Northcom, and they're again in NORAD here. This became the general, and Swanwick became Secretary of State. I think he is Secretary of State Swanwick. So this is the general who can order, commands as he's ordering these soldiers to deploy a nuke. These are tactical command here in Man of Steel, and by the way, the uniforms are literally accurate to the actual military. I wouldn't be surprised there are actual military people also in these uniforms actually conducting these operations. So this is sort of a follow through. And in Suicide Squad, very interestingly enough, we have the military presence there as well, headed by Colonel Rick Flag. He's another colonel. We had Colonel Hardy. This is Colonel Rick Flag. He's a fictitious character, of course, as Colonel Hardy. But it's just interesting how they still use real fatigues, real military uniforms. And so here he is with his boss, which is Amanda Waller. And again, you see the big screens behind them, right? This is the operations room, obviously. And this is the tactical, the carrying out, the execution of tactical things. Now, way back in 1917, we didn't have screens, but they did have maps. So you can see them planning out there in Wonder Woman. And again, you can see the tactical leaders there. And then here are the troops deployed on the ground fighting, right? It's pretty interesting. And in Justice League, we didn't get the generals and those kinds of tactical stuff, even though I do believe in Zack Snyder's cut, probably we would see that because he's been very consistent with that. I don't know what happened, okay? In Justice League, they cut it out. It's there. Again, we didn't see the military in action in Justice League. We didn't see them in action. That's another very interesting thing. All movies we saw them in action. Now we know that was cut out from Justice League. We knew a tank went flying and Cyborg blocked the tank and protected a police officer. So I don't know what happened. Looked like you're there. But at the end of the day, I can tell you that there's a consistency in seeing military presence is literally a character in all of the DCEU movies. Literally, and that makes sense because human beings have to defend their world, so they have to be aware of everything that's going on. So it does make sense that they were aware of these things. So it's very interesting. And militaries at different scales, different levels, like covert military and stuff like that. So it's very interesting how the DCU has had every single DCU movie so far has had military presence. I'm not sure if Aquaman will have, or Shazam. It may not. I know Wonder Woman will have because she's doing a covert operation once again, so that should be interesting. Talking about Wonder Woman, though, maybe it's something you guys might want to ask Patty Jenkins. Like, Steve Trevor could not. I mean, if he survived that blast, first of all, he better be in another dimension or something because he would be 90-something years old in '84. Okay, if he was 30 years old or 30-something years old in World War I, then you're talking about 67 years added to that. That's 97 years old, okay? Even if Wonder Woman had a son with Steve Trevor, he'd be 67 years old. So there's no way Steve Trevor could be that young unless he's been in another dimension. And remember, the plane exploded. So this, you know what I'm saying? If it exploded, then Steve Trevor blew up with it unless he parachuted out and something else happened. But they didn't find him. And we see that Diana at the end of the movie was looking at his picture. So obviously he died. So what happened to Steve Trevor? That's a great question. And you can't say that Diana appealed to the gods because all the gods are dead. She's the last god. So that's not possible either. So what happened? I don't know. Did she visit Themyscira and they somehow revived him? I don't know. But what I would say is it's an intriguing twist that Patty Jenkins decided to go with and literally have everybody saying, what the F? You know what I'm saying? So I just wanted to share that with you guys. If there are any other moments you remember from Man of Steel, please share them in the comment section below, or you can share them in the chat section. Remember, you can chat up a storm with me. I am right now streaming this video, but I do not know if the settings, something that YouTube may be doing, is keeping you guys from actually seeing this video, because I'm seeing 0 views on the video. So I'm not sure if the audio seems to be playing. Screen share here. Saying 1 watching now. Okay. Oh, and somebody actually liked it. Now we have 2 watching. So it's possible that if you guys want to say hello, you can say hello, in the chat section to let me know you're there. But at the end of the day, I'm not too sure what exactly is going on here. But I wanted to share this with you guys. Before moving on. Oh, look at those pictures. These images are nice. They're sweet. And I showed you how this is literally the mojo that NORAD has. NORAD has, we have the watch. Okay. And if you look here, you see some US soldiers there, and you may even see some Canadian soldiers somewhere in the back there. It's US and Canadian. And there are special forces moving through. I would believe military is involved there. I wouldn't be surprised these are also 2 military officers and not just actors. This guy is probably an actor. I know these 2 people are actors. And we also know there's the FBI and CIA involved there, which have been involved in several other DCU movies as well. Okay. All right. I love the accuracy they portrayed these ancient soldiers in as well. And then here again, World War I. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm going to get out of here now. It's raining, so I can't really go anywhere. I'm kind of stuck on ground zero for a little bit. It's been raining all day. I wanted to go and work, but seeing that it was not going to happen, I decided to share this stuff with you guys. Anyways, I hope you guys have a good day. Enjoy yourselves, and God bless. I'm out of here.